Mount up! We're coming!
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and guess what, folks? It's in a shocking, stunning development. The names of the GM candidates that the Vikings are looking at somehow made it out into the universe. We're going to do a deep dive investigation. We've got federal agents looking right now for who might have leaked this information out to NFL insiders, but we've got it. We have 5 more candidates after yesterday. We talked about Terrence Gray from the Buffalo Bills interviewing or being requested to interview for the Minnesota Vikings open general manager position, and we've got a bunch more names. And as I go through this, I'm going to go through all of them. You might start to notice a little bit of a trend, and we'll get to that and exactly what that means. But there's also plenty of room and plenty of time for all questions, comments, thoughts, and feelings regarding the Minnesota Vikings. So you don't have to stick to the GM search. If you've got other thoughts, other takes, fire them in the chat, and after I go through the 5 candidates, we will fire up the conversation as well, and you can give your thoughts if you have them on some of these candidates. But I think the most interesting thing is what Kevin Seifert had to say about it, which I will read you at the end after we go through each reported candidate. So let's go. All right, so this is gathered by Seifert, but reported by Tom Pelissero and ESPN's Adam Schefter. The external GM candidates are as such: Los Angeles Chargers Assistant General Manager Chad Alexander, San Francisco Assistant General Manager RJ Gillen. We talked about Terrence Gray yesterday. He's on the list. Los Angeles Rams Assistant GM John McKay, Seattle Assistant GM Nolan Teasley, and Tennessee Assistant GM Dave Ziegler. Those are your candidates. And already you can kind of go, I'm noticing something here that each one of them is an assistant GM. Wow, you're sharp. You've got it. And that right there is interesting alone, because there is nobody on this list that you're going to find that they went deep into the weeds. Oh, this person is somebody I didn't expect. And look, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was an assistant GM when he was hired. But as you'll see as we go through this, the diversity in backgrounds does not really exist in this GM search. So let's start out with first Chad Alexander from the Los Angeles Chargers. His background: he was with the Baltimore Ravens from 1999 to 2018, was the assistant director of player personnel in Baltimore from 2009 to 2019. Then he worked for the Jets as a director of player personnel from 2019 to 2023, and then hired by the Chargers when someone in the Ravens front office, Joe Horitz, went to the Chargers. He brought Chad Alexander with him. So a deep background in the player personnel, in the scouting, and that is going to become a very serious trend as we go through this. Next candidate comes from San Francisco, RJ Gillen. He is the assistant GM, but he started as an assistant scout in 2015, became director of player personnel 2021, and was promoted to director of player personnel after that. Here's one thing that I noticed in looking this up. Pro personnel and player personnel are 2 different jobs. So pro personnel is just on the pro side. So that would be free agents, current players, and player personnel is everybody. So if it looks the same to you, squint, because you will see the difference. And player personnel is above pro personnel, just to make that clear. So Gillen, though, has only become an assistant general manager within the last year. So he's a little bit more green than some of the other candidates. John McKay of the Los Angeles Rams. He was a scouting assistant in 2016, worked his way up to director of pro scouting in 2021, named assistant general manager in 2025, and if you are doing the math correctly in your head, worked with Kevin O'Connell when he was with the Rams in 2021. Dave Ziegler was actually a general manager. So he started with the Broncos in 2010, became what was called in an article I was reading, the de facto GM of the New England Patriots in 2020, 2021, as the Patriots were kind of trying to rebuild. And then he ends up getting a GM job with the Raiders. And that did not work out very long because the head coach of the Raiders was Josh McDaniels. And we know how that goes. It goes very short when Josh McDaniels is your head coach. And so he was out and did a little work with New Orleans and then has been brought into the Tennessee Titans front office as their assistant general manager. So this is a Patriot Way candidate who worked with them for a very long time, earned the trust of Bill Belichick from 2013 to 2021, and is the only person on the list with previous general manager experience, albeit not for a very long time. But I did text somebody in the know with the Raiders who told me railroaded was the word. Just railroaded. Josh McDaniels blew everything up. But I think people out there in Las Vegas believe that Dave Ziegler could do a good job. He just never got the chance because of, Josh McDaniels. So Nolan Teasley is the last one on our list. He is from the Seattle Seahawks. He came up in the scouting world. You're catching on, right? In 2013, and then was a scout for 3 years, got bumped up to director of pro personnel, and has been the assistant general manager of the Seattle Seahawks for the last 2 years. So let's talk about Seifert's takeaway and then my takeaway from this group of GM candidates. And Ben Goessling reported that there is not expected to be more. So this is the people that they're looking at along with internal candidates. And if you've got takes or opinions, like feel free to jump in and share them on any of these people or organizations they come from, because that's what I kind of want to focus on when we go back and, kind of have a final take here. But here's what Seifert had to say on ESPN. He said, quote, "My big takeaway is that the Vikings are not looking to hire some general manager who would come in with a lot of juice and be the alpha leader of the entire organization and have the authority to overhaul the whole front office if he wanted to. They are looking for someone to fit in." So that's the way that Seifert interpreted this GM search. But I want to look at it in a slightly different way and kind of the same way. Number one, hey, do you think that they're focused on scouting? Do you think that they're focused on the draft for the next GM hire, since every single one of these guys has basically the same path to their assistant GM positions? I don't think that that is the wrong thing to do. It just stands out that each one of them, if I just swapped names, there was one time as I was making the little graphics where I was like, wait, which guy is this? Did I have because all the paths looked exactly the same. It all went from scouting to player personnel to pro personnel, or the opposite, and then up to AGM. And that's where they sit now, in kind of the catbird seat to be the next group of people that become general managers in the NFL. Now, when you look at who's been interviewed recently, when you look at hot candidates for general manager, my friend Ben Standig, who covers the Commanders, he does a thing where he polls a bunch of agents, and he asked agents, hey, who's the next GM that's upcoming? And Teasley's name was on that, and so was Terrence Gray. So these are people who are not a shock, not where the heck did they find this guy? Like, they picked the best organizations and they picked the AGMs who traveled the same path that most general managers tend to travel through, the same ladder that they climb from. You got to be a really good scout. You got to work your tail off. Then you got to impress people in your front office. And then you get promoted. And then you get promoted. And then you reach a point where you actually can't get promoted anymore. And then you go work for some other team. And that's how this has gone. So it's clear that what they want is what Seifert is describing, which is mostly inexperienced people. I would even say Dave Ziegler, with his 2 years of GM experience, there's essentially no experience being a general manager on this entire list. So they're not bringing in somebody from the past who has run a team before and saying, it is your show, take over the Minnesota Vikings. It's much more going to be a first time, if they go outside the building here, a first time general manager who is learning on the job a bit, but these are guys who have been in front offices for a long time, working under good general managers who know the ropes and who have come up in this world the same way as everybody else who works there. So if you hire a longtime scout who is an AGM and he comes into a building with a bunch of people who are first scouts, then college directors, then whatever currently, and some of them maybe have settled into their positions and like them, and maybe some of them are on their way up, they understand the same language as the person who is going to lead the Minnesota Vikings, unless they go with Rob Brzezinski, who does have a different background in the salary cap. But so I think that the thing that we were talking about, the mystery box, would you go with a candidate that is going to clear out a front office, that's going to be the new czar, new sheriff in town, we're changing the whole Vikings organization? It doesn't look like it. It looks like it's going to be a lot of status quo with a new leader whose job is going to be to connect with these people, which they'll probably do better than Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah because they come from the same path and they come from the same background. And Ziegler played football and maybe some of the other guys did, I don't know. But they came from the scouting, they speak the lingo. So I think that if you're looking to keep the train going in the same direction, where you have powerful coaches on offense and defense and a front office full of people that the Wilfs clearly like a lot, then whichever one of these candidates goes in there, I mean, they all have a background that would suggest that they should be just fine in doing so. Now, I mean, who knows in terms of how it really works when they get there, but just a background. There's nothing that you'd say, is this really going to work? Because all their backgrounds are basically the same, and it's the most traditional way to do it. But I think that there's some other takeaways we can work with outside of just, well, it doesn't look like the bold and the, hey, what if they just blow this whole thing up and go total way different? I think from their perspective, they've had 3 of the last 4 seasons be winning years overall. 9-8 isn't spectacular, but it's still a winning season. And 14 wins, 13 wins, and they must feel like with Flores and O'Connell in place and the front office that has Rob Brzezinski and a number of other people that have been there a long time, many of them dating back to when the Vikings built a team that went to the NFC Championship, that the ownership feels like this is the group that we want, and we just want the right leader to take us into the future. I don't think that it's necessarily the wrong plan. It certainly is not the bold plan. Like the way that we've talked about Caleb Banks, it's like the total opposite. This is the drafting Dylan Thieneman of GM plans, which is every one of them has a great resume and every one of them looks extremely qualified, and nobody comes from any sort of different background of like the cap, or it doesn't even have to be an analytics person. I even mean salary cap or something else from, the business side or anything else like that. It's like they are going scouting. But there is some things that we can glean. Number one is they have struggled so much. It's going to be breaking news to all of you in the draft. And when Rob said this offseason that he believes in building through the draft, I think that it's time for the Vikings organization to start believing in building through the draft, because to understand why they were so bad at the draft under Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah really takes a very long explanation, but it kind of goes back to Rick. At the end of Rick's time, they were also bad at drafting. They got Jefferson, they got Darisaw and Metellus and Bynum, and not a whole heck of a lot else during that entire time. But when Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah gets here, he tries to take a big swing in the draft by trading down to fill every position of need, totally fails. And then they just decide the draft's just not worth it for them. So they draft first rounders and then the rest just get traded for Cam Akers and others. TJ Hawkinson is a pretty good player to trade for, but even then, like you're making in 2022, you're making a trade that sacrifices a second round draft pick. They made big sacrifices to get individual players to try to fill holes when they were winning, whether it's the 13 win season or if it's the 14 win season, which made sense at the time because you just lost Christian Darrisaw, but there's some more draft capital that goes out the window. And they didn't do a darn thing to get compensatory draft picks. If you look at how many compensatory draft picks they've had, and this is one of the reasons that I would kind of like tear my hair out when people would be asking, do we get a comp pick for that guy? Like, look, you don't get a comp pick for anything, okay? Ever. Not with this front office. Unless it's Sam Darnold, which I don't think a Sam Darnold for a third now looks like a good trade. But going the route of a bunch of people who have been scouts, really, it signals strongly the next build that we have is going to be through the draft. And I noticed something interesting the other day, that now that Harrison Smith is not on the team currently, it probably was altered a little bit by that. But when you look at average age, my friend Ian Hartitz tweeted out about the average age of every team. Suddenly the Vikings are creeping up that list. And that's even with Andrew DePaula still, which they should take long snappers out of your average age. But without Harrison Smith, without Jonathan Grenard, suddenly you start to look and go, you know what? That's actually not as old of a team as it looked like just a year ago. They still have veterans. They still have contracts that are coming up, but we are very close to this actually being a young team. If a couple of guys exit after this year and maybe turn into compensatory draft picks or whatever after this year, I guess some of them can't turn into comp picks, just for the record, Hawkinson and Jones, but someone like Brian O'Neill, Andrew Van Ginkel, I don't think can either because his contract has void years, but whatever. The point just being that they have some veteran players that could be on their way out, and they know that Rob Brzezinski has set them up with cap space, and he has set them up with draft capital because of the Jonathan Grenard trade. And if they go through this season and don't give away a bunch of draft picks to acquire players, they'll have a fairly good amount of draft capital, and they could potentially get more depending on what happens. So knowing that there is a rebuilding process that's going to have to happen, it's not likely to be a tanking process. It's likely to be a rebuilding on the fly process. But what does that take? That takes good scouting and good process in the draft and accumulating the assets, smart decisions in free agency, and you can quickly rebuild in the NFL. As we saw, the Vikings went a dip in 2023 and right back to having a very good roster in 2024. So it can happen, but it's going to happen through the draft, especially if you sign Kyler Murray to an extension. And it feels pretty clear with what they did here that they are looking at, we want evaluators, we want people who know how to manage the room and get the most out of the scouting department and hit on those players in the draft, because that's gold. If you hit on players in the draft, that's gold. There's really only a couple of ways to build this thing. I mean, one is through some trades. You can do that every once in a while, and you can win trades these days because teams get against the salary cap or whatever. There's sprinkling of free agency, but very rarely do you have a 2024 where you just go out and get a million players in free agency. And then there's hitting on those draft picks. And that's what it looks like they're aiming to do. But when we go through the organizations, this was the other thing that stood out to me. When we go through the organizations that these folks have come from, there is a lot of course, success. But when you look at the organizations that do things on a kind of a next level, like not just your typical run-of-the-mill franchise who is doing the same stuff they've always done, but teams that we generally think of like, oh man, they made another good move in that franchise. Philadelphia is not included here, but everybody else that we think of that way is represented. So the Chargers, have the Baltimore connection. And Baltimore, for a very long time, was their front office ahead of the game. I mean, they were the ones, they were adopting. I mean, I look at it through a data lens, of course, but they were adopting certain things along the data route way before other teams were. And they have consistently managed free agency really well. They've let players go at the right time. They haven't overpaid people. They've developed players really well. And until, really last year, they just consistently had good defense after good defense after good defense, even if Lamar is holding up one side of that. But they were always good at finding that one extra free agent to help, or draft picks or whatever. They did draft, Kyle Hamilton. But you go through their history for the last decade and a half. The Baltimore Ravens have been at the front of the line for some of the smartest moves and one of the best run franchises in the NFL. The Los Angeles Rams, do you even need to say it? And I know the thing is, they went full Rams, but the idea of going full Rams was that they would screw themselves over so mightily, aiming for that Super Bowl and ultimately attaining it, that we wouldn't even hear of the Rams ever again. They would just be off into obscurity after they won that Super Bowl. It would all fall apart. And it didn't. And I know Sean McVay and Les Snead have worked really well together. But John McKay has been a part of that in that process of rebuilding. And how did they do it? Well, they hit on draft picks, of course. They made good decisions in the draft. They made good free agency decisions. They rebuilt around a veteran quarterback. And when you think about Matthew Stafford, it's what makes it really interesting is that Matthew Stafford was considered not quite Kyler Murray-ish, but kind of. Like, he had some major upside seasons, but he hadn't won in the playoffs. He had a losing record in Detroit. Detroit was a terrible franchise. And when he did have his good years, they were very good. And he was talked about, hey, maybe Matthew Stafford's in contention for MVP, but they never quite had enough, whether it was coaching and hiring Matt Patricia, or whether it was defense when they had good offenses, or whatever it might have been. Something was kind of always holding him back. And then he gets to the Rams, it takes off to the next level. There's a big difference there in height and weight and arm strength and stuff, but it's kind of a similar background of a very high draft pick who was with a bad organization that got things turned around in a good organization, but only in part because they made a lot of really good decisions. When you look at their roster, you have, Cam Curl comes to mind for me as not a guy who was drafted in the first round. And you can bring up the Jared Verse thing, but they've built an entire D-line after Aaron Donald retiring. It felt like that should have been it, right? Like, oh, Aaron Donald's done. Their D-line's going to fall apart. But, Kobe Turner and other guys up front who have turned into really good players for them, a lot of it is through the draft. And then they've made some very smart decisions elsewhere, like going to get Devontae Adams, which was a great move for them last year. And it has to be paired with great coaching, and it has to be paired with great quarterback play, or it's going to fail. But they've rebuilt an offensive line a couple of times. Like, they just have very good process. They always seem like they're a little bit ahead of the game. And the Seattle Seahawks are kind of the same way now. But I think that we didn't give the Seahawks enough credit because they didn't win much in the playoffs with Geno Smith. But the thing to focus on with the Seattle Seahawks is that it took years, and it was a process. It was slow. It was, all right, we got rid of Russ, and then they got the high draft pick from Russ, which was really helpful for them. But Geno Smith comes in, and they're just adding pieces, adding draft picks, and building it until it becomes this behemoth that no one could beat last year with Sam Darnold in the mix. And of course, they made the really right decision to move on from Geno at the right time, bring in Sam Darnold. But you look at that whole roster, they built the offensive line on physicality, ability to run the football. Gray Zabel comes in and starts plowing people right away. They built a fast, super athletic defense that at the right time, here's DeMarcus Lawrence. At the right time, here's Leonard Williams. And piece by piece. And what I was thinking about a lot today was just about how I mentioned that power rankings thing yesterday, how it's really in the NFC, it's a roster building contest because everybody, and I'll include the Vikings in this. I don't know how Kyler's going to play, but he's a good quarterback. Everybody's got good quarterbacks in the NFC. I mean, other than the Cardinals, look around and find me one other quarterback that you would say, oh my gosh, it's awful. Probably Atlanta is the only other one. Tua has some history, but that's the only other one. I mean, Bryce is pretty mid, but aside from that, a lot of good quarterbacks, and we don't know with Tyler Shuck yet. The NFC South shouldn't count for any conversation, but the point is that most quarterbacks in the NFC are pretty good, but there's no Tom Brady, there's no Patrick Mahomes, there's no Josh Allen in this conference. It's a roster building contest. So here's the Seahawks, the Rams represented, and the Chargers on the AFC side, but they built an extremely good roster around Justin Herbert, and had it stayed healthy, who knows, they could have been the team in the Super Bowl. All of the teams that the Vikings are looking at have very strong top to bottom rosters, not just, well, hey, they kind of latched onto a quarterback or something like that. So that really stands out. San Francisco, they have very much their own way of doing things, but San Francisco has been ahead of the game with roster building for a long time. They have not drafted well recently because they've had so much success, I guess. And then, they seem to have their own view on the draft. That's who knows about some of the recent draft picks. But, them building free agents and, through trades where they get McCaffrey and they get Trent Williams and, things like that. So I think what you have here is a lot of teams represented that tend to be at the front of the line, not just in, oh, they won, but also in tangible stuff that you can point to of this team has a very good way of going about things through the draft, or how they've built, or whether it's just being patient over multiple years, knowing that you really can't just go kind of all in at one point. It usually takes several seasons worth of good drafting and free agent decisions in order to get there. So now, I mean, the expectation really should be, as we get to the, kind of the whole point here, is the expectation should really be that the Vikings bring in someone who will stick to mostly the course and is going to build methodically. And I said yesterday, as we look at these candidates, I said, when it comes to Terrence Gray, what's the edge? And then it turns out that every other candidate has the same exact background. So I could give the same sort of speech of like, what's the edge? So what's the edge that you get from any one of these people? And I think that the edge is that their organizations have largely been extremely functional. And the only wild card there is Dave Ziegler. Dave Ziegler, having been a GM before for a dysfunctional franchise, but having come from the Patriot way, which at a certain time looked really, really smart, and then at a certain time looked not as smart after Tom Brady left. But I think we would also agree that the Patriots built a lot of good rosters and were ahead of their time once upon a time. Like the Patriots were a team that were getting rid of players before they fell off, when other teams were signing their veteran players and letting them decline, right? That's something Belichick did really well. I think Belichick in that front office was good at identifying players who fit the type of scheme. Remember how Jamie Collins was good as a Patriot, and then he would go somewhere else and he wasn't good and he'd come back to the Patriots? I think it happened like twice because Jamie Collins was a good fit there. And I think that there's some similarity there with this. And I don't know what Brian Flores' connection is either, but that's noticeable here, where you have a Patriot. Brian Flores came up in the Patriot way. You have a Ram, Kevin O'Connell. Are we putting two and two together that this is going to be extremely collaborative with the coaches, which I think both coaches are very, very good at identifying talent. Kevin O'Connell wanted Donovan Jackson and Jordan Addison for his offense, and TJ Hawkinson, and all of them have been really good fits. Even, Jordan Mason last year coming into this offense. So the players they've added have been very effective. It hasn't just been Justin Jefferson. It's been an overhaul of a lot of positions on the offense that has worked out. And then, I mean, you don't even have to explain defensively how much Brian Flores has completely reworked this defense in his vision. So There's some of my thoughts on the Vikings names being released now, or, at least told to Tom Pelissero. And I shouldn't say released because the Vikings said we won't be releasing names, but the agents for these GM candidates went, okay, well, we'll take care of that for you. We'll make sure that our guy's name is out in the news cycle. But anyway, so thoughts and feelings. And I'm going to throw a kind of a curveball FanDuel question of the day at you. If, think about it from a GM perspective, you're going to come in, whoever this is, whether it's Chad or Terrence or whatever, Dave, whichever guy comes in, they're going to start looking at the future, right? So at this time next year, right now, the Vikings over under is 8.5. We've talked about that a lot. Like, it's a very typical Vikings over under, and they're plus 600 to win the division. What is it going to be next year at this time when next offseason is over under the new GM? This is it's a hard one to answer, but I'm curious about you guys trying to look a year in the future to what the new GM might do and what his approach might be. And we could talk about that. So, okay, well, let's get into your questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, takeaways, whatever is on your mind. And don't be afraid to change the subject, to something else with the team or the NFL. I'm totally fine with that. If you're just joining for the first time or whatever, it's a very wide open chat and sometimes it gets a little weird. So, Joker starts us off with what edge should they be looking for in the next candidate? How far opposite of Kwesi will they want the next guy to be? I think we're seeing how far opposite of Kwesi they want the next guy to be, and that is extremely opposite. I mean, this is as traditional as it comes, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I tend to myself lean toward a little bit of outside the box thinking, but I'll tell you what I learned from Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is that if you go into a place where you don't necessarily speak the language and you're put in charge immediately, it's a tough road to get everybody to buy in. And Kwesi, I think, really struggled with that. Now, if we look at the accumulation of what they did, they got a lot of good players in here, especially free agency and trades, a lot of good players, and they won a fair number of games for a team that didn't have a franchise quarterback. So they settled on a lot of things that ended up working, but the way that they jived or gelled together clearly was not that great, or Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah would be here still. So I think that the scouting brain, the pro personnel, player personnel brain is always thinking, how can we get the best evaluations? Now, that might be from someone who comes from the Rams, someone who comes from Baltimore. Those are forward-thinking data teams, like data-driven type of teams that make their decisions. And not every decision is going to be loved by the analytics community, but they make informed decisions and they have good process, and things like that. They've hired a lot of analytics people and they want to be ahead of the game. Like, those are franchises that take a lot of pride in being at the front of the line with that stuff. And once upon a time, that was Belichick in New England. So you can be forward thinking and have a scouting background. Like, you don't have to just be a dinosaur. And I notice also that there isn't anybody on this list who's like 73. RJ Gillen has very nice hair, and I was a little bit annoyed. I'm like, oh man, he's got, he doesn't even have the regressing hairline yet. So, these are mostly, and I don't want to say younger as in they're all like very young, but, we don't have anybody who's like 62 in this list. These are all people who have kind of been up and coming into this role, which means that they will have to lean on a lot of people who are experienced. They will have to collaborate with a lot of people who are experienced if any of them get hired. But I think the edge is bringing over the things that have worked from their previous employer. Because the other thing I noticed too is that every single one of these guys spent a very long time with somewhere. Every single one of them, it was like, here's 15 years with this team or 10 years with this team or whatever it might be. all of them were with one team for a great deal of time that was successful. So it's not somebody that's bounced from this front office to that front office or whatever. It's coming from franchises that have built teams that have succeeded kind of from top to bottom. And even with Baltimore or Seattle or Los Angeles, they've had to build and build again. I would even say that for San Francisco, where they got there, like San Francisco in 2019. Not a lot of the team is left by 2023 when they get there again, including the quarterback. So, and really a lot of them have dealt with the quarterback stuff too. Like whether it's a big quarterback contract or if it's drafting a quarterback or making a big trade for Matthew Stafford or whatever, or changing from Geno Smith to Sam Darnold. So I think that the edge is in the experience with the franchise that these guys are coming from. That would be where I would go first with that, I think. Let's see. Bryson says, I know the GM search is the main story, but now since the draft, but please sell me on Jacoby Thomas. I don't like the pick at all. Not athletic and can't tackle well. Well, one thing is always to start with when it comes to a draft pick is we just don't really know how anybody is going to work out. There are a lot of players in the past that we've said, I'm not sure what they saw in that guy that have worked out. And there are ones that looked like sure things that haven't. So on draft day, we never really know. That's a good place to begin. The other part would be that Jacoby Thomas, well, he did miss a lot of tackles. I think one of the reasons he missed a lot of tackles was because he had a lot of times where he's flying downhill trying to make plays. And we see this a lot sometimes with draft prospects, like, oh, the guy can't tackle. He had this, number of missed tackles because he's around the ball a lot. I think that would be the explanation, and you don't always get it. But he's also been a ball hawk. I mean, he had 5 interceptions. He was a playmaker. I think that what they're looking for, and I remember going through this with someone else. Maybe it was Mekhi Blackman. We've sort of done it with Ty Felton a little bit. Back end of the 3rd round draft pick is somebody you're kind of taking a guess on based on something. And I think what they like from him is his character. And I don't just mean he's a great guy that would marry your daughter. I mean, like his mind. He's got a mind for the game. And they believe that seeing it and reacting to it is the best skill that a safety can have. That's why they drafted Jacoby Thomas. And if you watch a lot of his interceptions and big plays, that's what it is. It's just IDing stuff and then attacking the football and making plays. So I think that that's what they liked. And they felt like in this defense, that's what you're going to have to do. That being a safety, I mean, we know this, right? Like what was Anthony Harris's 40? What was, I think Sendejo was pretty fast, but what's Cam Bynum's 40? It's probably like a 4.6. So it's read and react over necessarily raw tools. But that one certainly was a reach by a lot of people, and his past beyond just this year at Miami was not exceptional. So I'm not telling you it's going to be the next great draft pick in Vikings history. It's just that we've kind of seen this type of player succeed before. So I wouldn't be shocked if it worked out again. Alex, good to see you, buddy. Can you elaborate on Albert Breer's latest tweet suggesting the Vikings copy the Lions and Rams front office structure with Rob and a new hire? So it's possible that they maybe taking old Purple Insider's idea here from weeks ago, or maybe not. I don't know. But it was something that I thought of that, quite a while back of, hey, why not have Rob Brzezinski be the president of football ops, and then below him is the general manager and the head coach, and he manages them. And then the head coach manages everybody else, and it's Rob who speaks directly to ownership. Now, at the owners' meetings, I asked Mark Wilf directly, are you going to change the structure? And his answer was no. In fact, let me get it for you, because Seifert actually tweeted that answer not too long ago. And, Seifert didn't give me credit for a great question. Terrible. I'm joking. Okay, so here's the answer. So I asked him, hey, would you consider like a president of football ops, then GM? And Mark Wilf said, I think we're going to stick to the way we've done it. It's just a matter of getting the right person. So I like that idea. And if they change their mind and Mark decides, hey, actually, that's a good idea to do, then I would be for it. Because I think that Rob Brzezinski is really valuable as someone who knows everyone in that front office. And also we saw this year that, he put the guardrails on in a very good way and managed assets in a very good way. And I think if you have kind of the two sides of things really working closely together, of someone who understands asset management extremely well in Rob Brzezinski, and showed that this offseason, with someone who understands evaluation extremely well and getting to the right conclusions with draft boards, with free agent decisions, with trades, but getting the right evaluations of those players. And that's how it can come together. I think that could be a very good structure. So I'm for it. And I agree with Albert that that's a good idea. It's just that, Mark Wilf said that that's what they weren't going to do. So maybe they'll change their mind. The Magic scientists definitely need to poach from Seattle. Well, I know that he has had a really good reputation as somebody that's rising in this side and was expected to become a GM at some point. Your team wins the Super Bowl. It's like, hey, people from the Chiefs and the Eagles, like, they get hired by other teams, right? Because they won the Super Bowl and they're at the top of the mountain. So, look, when we go to Seattle's process, it was all about evaluation, and a lot of their draft picks were about fit with what they wanted to be and the identity that they wanted to build with. It felt like this Vikings draft got criticized for them drafting for fit. But my thought was, I'm not saying they had the best draft of all time, but my thought was, well, it kind of makes sense to get players that you feel like are going to fit, because look what happened to the 2021 draft and the 2022 draft, when it was either Rick's players that didn't fit. They got rid of all those guys. And then in 2022, when Flores comes in, he gets rid of all those guys. So you need players that your coaches believe fit with their systems. And I think the Seahawks probably did this better than anybody else in the entire NFL. William says names for GM candidates are okay, but no real surprise. Rookie class and their success is the real story we need to consider. Well, there definitely wasn't any surprise. No, there definitely wasn't. Or do you mean, or is that like two different things? But when it comes to like the group of GMs that we're talking about, or potential GMs, there was no real total shock. No, like, really, they're interviewing that person. There wasn't some GM that worked for a team for 20 years, which never happens, by the way. Isn't that odd? That if you get your one shot as GM, you're probably not coming back from it. There's been a few who have, but Tom Telesco, but that doesn't happen too much. So even the fact that Dave Ziegler could be on the list, he definitely got, a screw job when it came to Las Vegas. And I think people were very surprised when he was let go by the Raiders, but he was tied to Josh McDaniels and they just wanted to blow that whole thing up. I don't think that destroys his chance to be here, but it shows you what a rarity that it really is, that there are, a guy gets even a second chance at being a GM. So whoever comes in will likely be very inexperienced. Hans, if I'm saying that wrong, then let me know. I think it's funny that the Vikings thought they could keep the candidates a secret. I don't think they did. They were like, we're not going to announce it. We're not going to tell the world. But it was going to get out. Every one of these guys has agents, and every one of these guys' agents wants their name to be out. So yeah, it wasn't going to stay a secret. That's why we kind of snarked about it. Like, let's just wait and then we'll get the names. I promise. I don't have to go hunting. They'll come to us. Joker, if they let the Seahawks guy ask any questions, the first one has to be, what the heck were you guys thinking with Sam Darnold? Yeah, fair enough. But look, they were a team that was able to manage a situation where they were paying a quarterback. And regardless of, how that worked out, and it worked out very much on the favor of the Seattle Seahawks, they were a team that did something bold. If you go back and look at the reactions to them moving on from Geno Smith, there were a lot of people that melted over that. a lot of people couldn't believe they were moving on from Geno Smith. What? It's not Geno's fault they didn't win. They never built him an offensive line, et cetera, et cetera. And they just decided Geno was not worth the dollars that he was asking for. And they made a pretty bold move after he had won 10 games the previous season to move on from him and go get Sam Darnold. And a lot of that had to be the confidence in the team that they were able to build around him. And you just look at their draft picks. I mean, it's not just, whoa, hang on. What do we got here? Oh, look at this, my friends. Look at this. We've got ourselves some breaking news from Adam Schefter. Oh boy. Jauan Jennings, you are a Minnesota Viking. And we were kind of in the right ballpark for guessing the dollar figure. I was talking about 15 mil. It's 13 mil. So Emergency Podcast is on right now. The Minnesota Vikings and wide receiver Jauan Jennings from Adam Schefter here have reached an agreement on a 1-year deal worth up to $13 million, which means that it's actually less than $13 million. How about that? So I was wondering if they were going to, go with a wide receiver 3, or if they were going to wait until after June 1st, or wait until, yes, really, or if they were going to wait until, they got the new GM and, made a decision there. So they did not. They got a very good deal here for Jauan Jennings, a 1-year contract worth $13 million. Yeah, I know. This is why I have Schefter notifications on, is so when we're talking along that, we got the breaking news, and now we can break this down. In fact, give me a second to tweet that people should come join the live stream because we're breaking it down. Hold on one second. Okay. All right. So do we like it? 1 year, $13 million for Jauan Jennings. Your reactions? Well, your reactions so far are quite positive. Look, I think that Jauan Jennings is a really good fit, and I'll tell you why. Number one is 1 year means that it doesn't even matter that much if he's not a good fit. So that's, the contract is right. The dollar figure is right. They landed a guy who has 132 receptions over the last 2 seasons and has 1,600 yards and 15 touchdowns for the same price as Jalen Nailor got with the Raiders, only Jalen Nailor got it for a multi-year contract. So they are not locked into Jennings in any way, but if they feel like they want to extend him later, then he'll have been in the building for an entire year. They'll know how he fits. They can sell him on staying here if they want. But for now, this is an addition to make your quarterback better right away. And I actually think from a fit perspective that Jauan Jennings is a great fit for Kyler Murray. And that's because Kyler Murray has been effective in recent years in quick game. And Jauan Jennings is a bigger wide receiver who is strong and who runs through tackles. That's kind of his thing. He's not the twitchiest. He's not the blazing fastest. He was a 7th round draft pick for a reason, but he's very good at understanding defenses, getting open, mastering the Kyle Shanahan offense, which is definitely not easy. And then when he gets the ball in his hands, he's good at running through tackles. He's good at fighting through contact to go get the football. These are things that are going to be required for someone in a little more of a quick game situation. And it's like a big slot type wide receiver that Jennings can be. That's number one, is I think that just for what they were missing on the offense last year when they couldn't push the ball down the field. Oh, so Pelissero says it's $8 million with a chance to get to 13. So 8? Okay, wow. So it's actually 8, but bonus is built in to get to 13. There's a question that's coming in just a minute after I say how I like it, but you know what that question is why is it so low? Momentarily. But when it comes to his fit and the fact that he is a bigger receiver who can get open underneath, get some yards after catch, that is just something they didn't have. And last year with JJ McCarthy, It didn't work by having all the deep wide receivers, because Jefferson and Addison are going to continue to be downfield wide receivers, but they have not really had a possession guy since KJ Osborne. And that doesn't mean he can't go downfield. It's just that more of his thing is to be a possession type wide receiver, average 12 or 13 yards per catch, as opposed to like 16 or 17. I don't remember exactly what Naylor averaged per catch, but he was a downfield wide receiver that they were looking to clear out and stuff like that. Now they have someone who is going to be very reliable in the underneath areas. And I think that jives extremely well with Justin Jefferson, TJ Hockenson, and Jordan Addison. So the other part is that he is a very physical player. He is a blocker. He's unafraid. Like this run game, I've been watching back Miami run plays, as one does, and I noticed that they were trying to get the receivers involved a lot. So that is kind of the theory that has been working in the NFL since the Rams did it with Cooper Kupp. A lot of teams have used their wide receivers a lot in the blocking game. Jennings is a big dude, and he's going to have no problem being invested in the blocking game part of it. The other part that I like is that he can play up. And what I mean is, if Jefferson gets hurt, if Addison gets hurt, you are not trading the equivalent of a 4th round pick for Adam Thielen, because you have a guy who's been a wide receiver too. He is not, I think, in his most ideal form, a wide receiver too, but he has been a wide receiver too at times during his career. Think about all the injuries because of the power station. I joke, but they've had a lot of injuries in San Francisco, where he's had to been wide receiver 1 at times, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. He's had to line up in all sorts of different places and run all sorts of different route trees. And he's been able to do that effectively for San Francisco. So that does bring us to the question, and then I'll get to your reactions in just a second. But it does bring us to the question of, why was Jauan Jennings, a guy who has 132 catches over the last 2 seasons, available on May 7th for $8 million? That could be up to 13, depending on how many passes he catches, I'm guessing. Or, some of those are like, if you win the Super Bowl, you get a bonus. So essentially $8 million, and we'll see. Why is he available? Number one, I do think that there is something to the idea that San Francisco pumps up everybody with that offense, that a lot of teams will stay with it. And hopefully this is a lesson for the next general manager, that teams will often stay with their evaluations from guys coming out of the draft and never really change their mind. So this is a 7th round draft pick who I think it's easy to look at and go, well, he's not a crazy great separator. He's not like a super blazing fast wide receiver that's going to run by everybody on deep routes. What if he's just solid and understands how to do a lot of different stuff? Well, are we paying X number of dollars for that? But when you compare him to guys that have gotten $17 million to $20 million in free agency, I brought up Romeo Doubs, but how about like Kelvin Ridley or Jerry Jeudy? These guys are not that good, and they're now making double what Jauan Jennings is making. Did he overplay his hand? So it seems. Was he disgruntled in San Francisco? Well, he did try to demand a trade last year. So the answer seems to be yes. And there also appears to be some things that maybe his on the field demeanor doesn't always rub people the right way, where you have some incidents with Shelby Harris and with Trayvon Morig. So there's some stuff there, but it's not anything that you would grab onto and say that he's really concerning. And he's supposed to be a cog in the machine, just like he was in San Francisco. And my guess is that from Jennings' perspective, if things work out really well in Minnesota, that he could get a bigger contract next year, which happens a lot to Vikings players. Or you could be in a situation where the Vikings change their mind on Jordan Addison and decide that they really like Jennings. And Addison, I don't know if he has any issues off the field or negotiations aren't going well and they decide to make a trade. Maybe just by having him here, you have a little bit of security. That's why a 2-year deal might have been a little better. That was maybe actually 1. But just from a price tag perspective, You just can't do better than this. You literally can't do better. For that production, for that dollar figure, I don't know how it could be a better contract. You aren't locked into it. Even if you can't stand the guy and he ends up with 15 catches, it's like, okay, well, that's kind of what an $8 million wide receiver, that's less than like Tutu Atwell got. That's less than Josh Palmer. I kind of perplexed, but it seems like the only conclusion must be that he really wanted to be here, because you would have thought someone else would have come through with a couple more million. So let's get your reactions. Evan says Rob is making a great case for permanent GM with this contract. Absolute steal. We have wide receiver 1, 1.5, and wide receiver 2. Yeah, I mean, Addison has had to be wide receiver 1 before when Jefferson was out 2023, and Jennings has played in that wide receiver 2 or even 1 role in San Francisco. He had, 77 catches in 2024. He has done a lot of that playing up to another role. It is an absolute steal, and I don't disagree with you, because Rob Brzezinski was able to get them to a point where I think now you can look at, that was a gaping hole, I thought, in the offense. Now you can look at from the perspective of, you have 3 really good wide receivers, 1 megastar, 1 very good guy at wide receiver 2, and a solid 2/3, and TJ Hawkinson and Josh Oliver. You got 2 running backs who could play. You added speed. You got a fullback. I mean, the offensive line, I don't think has gotten better, but it should be healthier, and it's gotten deeper with Ryan Vandemark and Caleb Tiernan. And it might improve just by Blake Brandel getting to play center. That's a pretty darn good offense around Kyler Murray. I would like someone to show me the last time, if ever, Kyler Murray had this complete of an offense around him. And the Vikings have gotten to this point of feeling like they have a pretty complete team. It's still questions for sure, still holes for sure, but feeling like they've got a pretty complete team without sacrificing the future in any real way. I mean, that's pretty good. That's why I keep coming back to asset management, folks, because this is good asset management. Just waiting it out. Hey, you didn't go pay another wide receiver in free agency. Somebody look up the dollar figures of other wide receivers in this year's free agency. Compare their numbers to Jauan Jennings. You waited it out. You kept the powder dry, and then you made a really good move to get somebody that, even if it doesn't work out, it doesn't hurt you at all in the long run. Steve, is he any good or is he toast? Well, he shouldn't be toast. I mean, he played the entire year last year. He is 28, and he's coming off of 2 very good seasons in San Francisco. I don't think this is like some of the previous names that we've sort of run through, the Michael Floyd situation we talked about a little last night, or the Kendall Wright, where the guy was sort of past his best days. I don't think that that's the case for Jauan Jennings. This feels more like a stop off for him in hopes that he has a really good year and then gets a bigger contract coming off this. So I have felt like from the beginning that Jauan Jennings was a really good idea for the Vikings. I just wondered if they could get him for less than 15, and now it's 8. So that's pretty good. Let's see. Planet Yevon, the Vikings have potentially the best wide receiver group in the NFL. I will be curious in the coming days to see, or even moments, I guess, if you guys are on social media, what San Francisco people will say about Jauan Jennings signing here, or just in general. Like, is there some reason not to look at his statistics and say, this guy looks like a pretty darn good wide receiver? And yes, I think that they do have the best wide receiver trio in the entire NFL. There are passing offenses that are really good, like the Los Angeles Rams and their MVP quarterback, that their duo is extremely strong. But with Kyler Murray, the other thing too with Kyler Murray is you don't want to leave anything on the table that makes you go, did they do enough for Kyler? Right? Like last year, there was this thing that we had for quite a while that was, did they really do enough for JJ? And I think at the end of the day, we all sort of concluded probably not, but still, you can't finish 42nd in quarterback rating. Well, what you would not want to do is at the end of this year say, one of the receivers got hurt and we didn't have anybody to replace him, and it just, wasn't Kyler's fault or whatever. You want to leave no doubt of whether Kyler can get it done with an offense like this or not. So now when you look at the overall improvements to the offense, you've settled the center position, it seems. I'm going to call that improvement because last year was such a mess with the center spot with the injuries. You have improved the backfield. You've improved the run scheme by bringing in Frank Smith from Miami, and you've solidified a position with a player who's a good fit, I think, for the quarterback at a very, very reasonable price. So, Jauan Jennings, this think about this, if they had made this signing on day one of free agency, we would have looked at each other like, what, how did Rob do it? Is he a magician? How did he get this person? There would have been, a ton of excitement at that point, but instead waiting it out and being patient, which Rob was able to do here, ends up landing them one of the best deals in all of free agency in Jauan Jennings based on, and look, if there's other reasons to think that, he's getting paid this because of X, Y, and Z, but I haven't been able to find it in researching Jauan Jennings other than there seems to be at least some personality stuff. And maybe he thought he was worth more than he was last year and maybe in this free agency, but otherwise, somebody who, at least from a skill, talent, and experience perspective, the San Francisco to Minnesota, Sam Darnold, Jordan Mason, now Jauan Jennings, it's worked. So, oh, Matt, that's funny. Ziggy better start working on his hoisting muscles because it's Lombardi time. That's good. But when you go through, here's the other thing too, that this shows us that the keep powder dry strategy for Rob Brzezinski, it worked. And it also might work more after June 1st when you get some extra cap space to work with. And there's some edge rushers and some defensive players that are still out there that I think the Vikings do need to add a veteran edge rusher or defensive player. Maybe it could be a defensive tackle too, just to get another veteran presence in there, but edge rusher for sure, because they've only got the two guys and then whatever Jake Golday is going to be. Marauder 3 deep. There goes 13 personnel. They must think Pee-wee is better. I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about. Is that what you're calling Kyler Murray? That's very, very mature of you. Not sure why you would insult your team's quarterback like that, but they're not. I just explained that Jauan Jennings is not a 3 deep type of wide receiver. That's not what you're talking about. He is, somebody that is much more of a possession wide receiver and tough and yards after catch. So he actually fits with Kyler Murray, but obviously you don't know anything since that's the way you're talking about Kyler Murray. But just when it comes to this guy's skill set, think about who San Francisco's quarterback is. Do you got a nickname for him? I don't know, but he's not very tall, is he? He's done a good job at crossing routes that are sort of in front of the face of the quarterback. He can go deep and make plays. He has, but he's been very good in the red zone. He's got 15 touchdowns over the last 2 years. So, he's been a red zone type of wide receiver that the Vikings haven't really had other than Jordan Addison, who, gets open while Justin Jefferson gets the attention, but that's not what Jalen Naylor was. So now they have somebody who's a little more of a red zone guy too. I think that the fit is extremely good. I don't think it's 3 guys who are running deep down the field. And I also think that when you look at now the depth of the personnel, you're right that they're not going to play 13 personnel. They never were, but they have versatility in personnel groupings where you can, run the football with Jennings as the only wide receiver out there just as a blocker and then run a play action and take a shot to him. You don't have to try to sub in. Remember when they were subbing in Trent Sherfield? Every time they were going to run or do a play action, they would bring in Trent Sherfield and he would be like a designated blocking receiver. You don't have to do that with Jauan Jennings because he has the size and ability to do it. Yeah, he's Alex, 10 out of 10 signing. What's the downside character? I mean, someone's going to have to find the examples other than other players not liking him on the field. And there might be a level of trash talk that the guy takes it to that is inappropriate, which is what Shelby Harris was saying. And that's something that they'll have to maybe have a conversation about. But as far as the other stuff goes, I mean, if you can learn as a wide receiver Shanahan's offense in multiple positions, I'm having trouble figuring out, what the downside could potentially be, especially at a price that is just, not very much at all. I mean, when you look at wide receiver prices, what did I say during the entire draft? I was like, you can't find wide receivers. They're so expensive. And I went through this, right? I went through all the receivers. This guy got 17. This guy got 20. This guy got whatever. And I went through the last year. It was like Diami Brown got 10 million and Tutu Atwell and all these guys who weren't even good. Josh Palmer. Jennings is good. And he gets less than that, which I'm sure he's not, and his reputation or his representation is not super thrilled with that. But, it's a really good deal from the Vikings perspective. New FanDuel question of the day, Jauan Jennings. Does he move the needle for you? Vikings over-unders 8.5. It would be tough to say that a wide receiver takes that up a win. But how about the odds to win the division? Plus 600 right now. I'll check in a little bit to see if they've changed it all. I would be surprised, but where do you think they should be in the division now that we're seeing more of the full picture? Joker, I'm biased because I love D-Hop, but this is definitely better for winning games. I would agree. Dan, JJ could catch, or Jennings could catch JJ's high heaters. Well, I'd be surprised if that's who's throwing it to him, but maybe at some point. Evan says, are we the favorites to win the division now? No, probably not, because people are still going to ask, they're still going to ask, what's Kyler Murray going to be? And that will be a question, but I don't think you can find any situation that Kyler Murray has had that is even close to this. I mean, he had DeAndre Hopkins, but who else? Did not have a complete group of wide receivers. Maybe the one year they brought in AJ Green. I'm not sure that I would call that a complete group of wide receivers because it was very old AJ Green who dropped a really important potential touchdown pass that kind of sent things spiraling a bit for the Arizona Cardinals. But that's, in the past. But I don't think that they ever had three solid to great wide receivers along with the good tight end. They did have that. They had parts of this. They had Trey McBride, but then they didn't have any receivers. They had Hopkins, but they didn't have a ton else other than that surrounding him. So I think this is the best. They've had a couple good offensive lines there through the years, but not this complete, and certainly not with this level of coaching. We have to remember, too, that I know during the season, all of you want to come to Kevin O'Connell's house and ask him to his face why he ran a trick play or whatever, angrily. But overall, when he's had starting quarterbacks, they've won games. When he's had veteran starting quarterbacks and they've had good passing attacks, and now you add another weapon that is the best wide receiver 3 on paper, the best wide receiver 3 the Vikings have had since when? A really long time. I mean, do I want to say Jake Reed? Because it's hard to think of another wide receiver 3 who had this many receptions, this many yards, touchdowns in the previous 2 seasons. Certainly KJ Osborne, though, is the fairest one, but even the peak season of Jauan Jennings is better than Osborne. But if he only performs like KJ Osborne and gets 50 catches, I mean, Osborne had, I think 2022, he had like 50 catches, 2023, maybe in the 40s. Like, even if he's just as good as KJ Osborne was, then that's a really, really strong signing at $8 million. And we saw the effectiveness of KJ when he was here with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Evan, we don't have the weird electrical stuff on the field here. Yeah, that's that is true. I don't think they have an electrical power station or whatever. Alex, this is winning on the margins type of contract for the Vikings, and good job keeping the powder dry. We talked about that at the owners' meetings. We discussed it, and this is why Jauan Jennings has come up on this show so often that I thought, well, what else could he be talking about? The only thing that he could be talking about when he says to us at the owners' meetings, and Dane and I do the podcast after, is after the draft signings. Because the key to after the draft, and here's why the powder staying dry was so important. If you sign Jauan Jennings, now I don't know how much this deal would be worth in terms of a compensatory formula, because that whole thing drives me insane. But means nothing to the compensatory formula because it was signed after the draft. Once you get through the draft, it's like a day or two later or whatever it is, when any signing has no impact on the compensatory formula. So not only do you get a wide receiver 3 who has had a lot of production in an offense that has similar roots to your own in Minnesota, but you get him in a way that it has no compensatory impact. You get him in a way that it has no long-term impact, assuming they didn't have to add 3 void years on a $1 million or a 1-year, $8 million contract. But I mean, that's just good stuff. That's just really well done by Rob Brzezinski. And you're right. I mean, if you want to talk about, because I want to continue with, rolling on the comments, but you want to talk about somebody making a case for themselves by not trying to drive the ball 300 yards on the first day of free agency, by not walking in there and saying, all right, this is my one shot. I got to get Travis Etienne for too much money. I got to get Romeo Dobbs for too much money. I got to get Kwity Paye for too much money, and saying, if we stay the course, and if we manage, and we got to restructure this contract, if we stay the course and we manage the assets properly, this is the type of stuff that good teams do with Rob Brzezinski in charge. So, I mean, I'm impressed. I am impressed by the way that Rob has handled this offseason. And sometimes it really pays, instead of being the X's and O's guy, to be the draft picks and cap space guy. Because this works out really well. Evan says, didn't everyone report that he wanted a ton of money? Maybe he just decided to make some money this year. Yeah. And well, that's it. It feels very Dalton Reisner-y. It feels like the guy was maybe not respected that much around the league, and he was thought of as just a product of San Francisco's offense, which it's not like he can't be a product of this offense. When they have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, you could be the same thing. Clearly, KJ Osborne was, because he didn't produce anything anywhere else. But here he was a 50-catch wide receiver. Feel free to continue to be a product of the offense. Block, catch the ball, yards after catch, underneath stuff, be available for your quarterback. That's all they need. They need 45 catches out of Jauan Jennings. They need 800 yards out of him, or whatever that works out to, 750 yards or something. And you've got, and if anybody pulls a hamstring, you could play wide receiver 2. And then we see maybe Ty Felton mix in a little bit, but all of those things are pluses for Jauan Jennings. And if his personality rubs people the wrong way, well, he's only here for a year. So it's not like you invested $1 gajillion in Jauan Jennings and 4-year contract or something. I mean, we were talking 15 was the number that we came to the other night when people were throwing out contracts. I thought 15 made sense. 8 with the upside of 13 was not really on my radar based on what wide receivers get paid. Still they could have drafted one. I'm just saying. Okay, I guess I understand not drafting one now, but I still, you should always draft one. Ryan says this is Rashad Bateman money for a top 30 wide receiver. Is that what Rashad Bateman gets? I don't even know what Rashad Bateman's contract is, but there are probably, if we go through guys that are wide receiver 3s in the league, there are probably only a couple of them with a resume like this. Joker says it's a great pickup for, you're quoting a dude on Reddit. Oh yeah. Cause I asked you guys, hey, what's people in San Francisco saying? Okay. So this is what a dude on Reddit said on San Francisco. I'll take this. This is good journalism, Joker. That's a great pickup for Minnesota. Jauan is an elite possession wide receiver and makes plays on third down. Bummed the Niners didn't want to keep him. Well, yeah, they certainly it's a question why they didn't want to keep him. Although the Niners have been willing to move on from a lot of players, they may be in a cap situation as well because they paid Brock Purdy. But you're not in a cap situation where you couldn't have paid him this. Maybe he decided to take a better deal just because he felt disrespected by the 49ers. But if you're seeing more from 49er fans, I'm curious. And I know that that's like reading the comments or the reviews on a movie from randoms, but I am curious about what 49ers people are saying. Third down is nice to have because that's where all the attention is going toward Justin Jefferson. That's kind of where TJ Hawkinson was making his bones early in his career. But if you have two more options like that, and possession receiver is exactly the way I would describe him, it's also exactly what I think they needed and that they were lacking. Ryan, sorry, it's probably going to end up Josh Palmer money. What a great deal. Well, sorry for him. Yeah, not sorry for them, but he's a lot better than that. Yeah, I'll get a 49ers reporter on here at some point for sure. But for now, we'll quote Reddit. But we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that at some point. Rookie minicamp availability is tomorrow, by the way. So I'll be coming home with whatever we get there, and I'm sure we'll have some comment from Kevin O'Connell on signing Jauan Jennings. Purple Kool-Aid, no doubt about his ability as a receiver and blocker, gives us needed depth for the contract. Can't grade it any other way than A+. Purple Kool-Aid, do we kick the tires on Kenny Moore? I did want to talk about that actually a little bit because Kenny Moore was released by the Indianapolis Colts and has been still a good slot receiver for a lot of slot corner for a lot of years with the Indianapolis Colts. So if the Vikings are not getting Harrison Smith back and they're moving Josh Metellus back to a traditional safety spot, which is not traditional with Brian Flores in any way, but they play two safeties back, could you benefit from getting a nickel corner? And if you came away from free agency, let's say they can get one more edge rusher to kind of add to the depth and a nickel corner or another safety, it would be like having your free agency, but just not in March. You got your Christmas presents, I don't know, when you visit your aunt or whatever, and you have Christmas in March just because that's when you could travel to Arizona or whatever. Anyway, Alexander, do feel like another good secondary player is needed. I agree. Evan says, didn't the 49ers offer him $17 million last year? Would that be $8 million after Cali tax? Players taxes, it's a little bit of a myth when it comes to the state and stuff. It's not a total myth, but it's a little bit. That's a different show. But when it comes to the 49ers offering him a contract, that I don't know. I mean, if he turned down $17 million from the 49ers, then that's certainly a mistake by Jauan Jennings. And I'm sure that I don't know how open and honest he is. I've never met him. That's going to come whenever he arrives here. But, he may say that. He may say that like he was seeking a place that could help him get to that next contract and continue to prove what he can do. And Minnesota's a good place for that. It's worked for a lot of people. I mean, Jalen Naylor getting a much better contract than Jauan Jennings was not on my bingo board. But Naylor gets, 25 to 30 catches and some team wants him. If the Vikings do well with Kyler Murray and Jennings has a good season, another good season, then he probably will get an additional payday. Goofster. I thought it might be Goofster at first, but a Goofster. Feels like we're a piece in the secondary away from the defense being elite, on top of hoping Turner, Banks, Orange, etc. hit. The offense is going to be absurd. Do we have 3 JJs on the team now? Yes. Yeah, that's why Jefferson has to go by Jets. And I don't know what Jauan Jennings, if he has a nickname, if he likes to go by JJ or not. But to your point, Goofster, about the secondary, I agree with you. Donovan Wilson is another guy, safety for the Dallas Cowboys, that I've kind of got an eye on of, well, could they add another safety to the mix here who's got some veteran presence so they can keep Josh Metellus more available to play that linebacker type of position or nickel type of position if they want. But I mean, I think when you look at this roster and this lineup, if Kyler Murray fits even to a decent degree, you should be right in the mix with the NFC North. I can't say that signing Jauan Jennings makes the Minnesota Vikings runaway favorites. I'll take a peek over if they've changed anything on FanDuel. I don't think it makes them runaway favorites for the North, but if Kyler Murray plays the same type of football he did in 2024, when he was the 12th best quarterback in the league with a very mediocre group around him with the Arizona Cardinals, here with this group, with Jauan Jennings in the mix and the other weapons they have, and it is a younger defense now than it was, but we've seen Brian Flores get the most out of multiple different types of groups of players through the years. 2023 to 2024 was very different, but they were both really good defenses, and the same from 24 to 25. So I think he gets benefit of the doubt of, like, you're going to have a top half of the league defense. It just depends on where that shakes out. Also, playing the NFC South when there's no scary quarterback there except for Baker, and then also getting the Dolphins and the Jets on your schedule is pretty favorable for Brian Flores too. More home games like this. It lines up to be pretty good. Isn't it funny how the Vikings are like this, right? They are exactly the Al Pacino thing. Just when you think you're out, they drag you back in. That is the Minnesota Vikings. Not that anyone should have been out after they signed Kyler, because then you knew they were going to be a serious team. But when you think about, they have kept a lot of veteran talent now and brought in veteran talent now without making any sacrifice to the future. That's where it's impressive, because last year, I think we all would have been fine with bringing on Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, but they did it in a way that was a hit to the future. And they're getting some of that back with Jonathan Allen, but Hargrave, and there's some dead cap there. It's not ideal. It's not what you wanted, was, the dead cap space. But these deals, Hockenson, they rework him, so he's up after this year, and Aaron Jones comes back for $5 million, and now Jauan Jennings. This is how you play the game. And so I don't know where it's going to go with the next general manager or whatever, but if this is how they're going to operate, getting extra draft capital, managing their salary cap extremely well, stockpiling assets to not be locked into things either with contracts. It's a lot of good stuff, Rob. It's a lot of good stuff. Would Jennings be wide receiver 2 in Arizona? No, he'd be wide receiver 1. He's better than Marvin Harrison. It might be the best wide receiver group in the NFL. You could tell me who you think is next. It might be. I'm trying in my brain to just think about who's better. If the Rams had drafted Mekhi Lemon, or if the Eagles somehow don't trade AJ Brown and they just have Mekhi Lemon, that deal has already been done in our heads for a long time. But if they just don't do it, then they would probably have the best unit of wide receivers. I don't know who can do better than this in terms of the depth, where your third wide receiver has peaked at 77 receptions before. Maurice, is trading Addison more of a possibility now? I do not think so. This team has never talked about Jordan Addison in any way other than glowingly. And they have begrudgingly talked about his off-field incidents, but never in a way that, we're going to get rid of him or we're even angry at him. I mean, they've said things like, we're going to wrap our arms around him. So Kevin O'Connell's love and appreciation for Jordan Addison seems to go so deep that I don't think that's a thought. And really, their commitment to Jordan Addison is not much. They picked up his 5th-year option. This is really a prove-it year for Jordan Addison. I think it's a prove-it year now for Jauan Jennings. It's a prove-it year for Kyler Murray. That sounds like a lot of motivated football players that the Vikings have been able to organize here. So that seems like a good thing for them. But I think with Addison, he is somebody that they would far prefer to just be great and give a contract extension to. I'd be really shocked if they signed Jauan Jennings to get rid of Jordan Addison. So I'm going to say no. That has been much closer to fantasy than reality during this entire time when it comes to the possibility of trading Addison. They love him as a football player, and I can say for sure that when it comes to the locker room, the sideline, the game day, there's no issue with Jordan Addison. I mean, he puts in the work, and he's an extremely good football player who has had some issues with driving or casinos or whatever, but has not had really a lot of issue as being an NFL player. Last year, his production, though, it can't be ignored that it dipped. So he does deserve criticism for that there were a lot of passes that he should have caught that were dropped. That can't continue, but maybe it gives them just even a little bit of a, hey, if Addison's not having his best year, you also have this other proven wide receiver. Ryan says, Naylor's contract he got versus this is a home run. Those three on the field will be nuts. Yeah, Naylor's contract was good for him, but I mean, his production was way less than Jauan Jennings. It was literally half. I mean, Naylor didn't catch 60 passes. It might have been like 54 over the last 2 years. And that's what Jauan Jennings had last season. And I know receptions, it's not everything, but it just really feels like the NFL just thought Jennings is asking for way too much money. And then once it became clear that he wasn't going to hit his big payday, he just decided to go to an organization that he thought he had the best chance to thrive in and then get on the radar and also prove that he could do it outside of San Francisco. That would be my guess. Jacob, Rob B, free agency with Kyler Murray, Jennings, Pierre looking sharp. And that's what I'm saying. If they land, let's say, a defensive end and maybe another defensive back in this powder dry free agency, and that ends up being the free agency. It didn't happen when it was supposed to happen. So we live streamed for 4 hours. And then at the end, we were like, James Pierre, that's it. But at the end of the day, you get the number one free agent quarterback, which is a pretty darn big deal. And you get one of the best wide receivers on the market production-wise over the last couple of seasons. And a guy who played really well as a defensive back last season for Pittsburgh. Potential starters at nose tackle, depth at running back, depth at linebacker in the draft, presumably depth at offensive line with Ryan Vandemark. We can't forget that either. Ryan Vandemark, they get a swing tackle who can start for, what was that, $4 million using the RFA. I mean, that's just pretty good management. Joker says Rob can't get all the credit for these deals. A lot is owners and coaches. Certainly it is, but the way that they managed their money, it's always going to be everybody, right? If they hire whoever, the candidates we went over, if they hire whatever candidates that we went over earlier, for sure, you're going to be talking about it being a collaborative effort. So Jauan Jennings comes to the Vikings. Kevin O'Connell sits with him. And so this thing I referenced earlier in the show that Ben Standig did, who covers Washington, and he talked to a ton of agents and they did a survey for him. In that survey, Kevin O'Connell is mentioned as somebody that the agents and stuff trust. And that's important. Like, they've been able to land people. There is no better guy to sit in a room and make you believe in yourself and believe in coming to the Vikings than Kevin O'Connell. They've gotten so many guys to either stay or come here. You show them the facility, all that stuff. Like, they're just good at this. They're just good at kind of going and getting their guy, but to do it at this price, very impressive. Maurice says having Addison in the slot consistently will do wonders. I don't know how they're going to work it out. Earlier in Jennings' career, he was more of a slot, and then recently he's been in everything. I think that's right. I looked at this the other day. I think they're all everything wide receivers. I think that they can line up anywhere, but I agree that Addison getting into the slot a little bit more could be useful. Trash boat, only 1 year to Jennings leaves the door wide open for a long-term extension for Addison. Well, that's what you want. That's what you really want. Ideally, if Jordan Addison catches 75 passes for 950 yards and 8 touchdowns and you sign him and you have to pay him $24 million a year or whatever, that's a win. That's a really good thing. And so I don't think that Jennings has a lot of impact other than it's clear since it's a 1-year deal. If they had signed him to a 3-year, $45 million contract or something, like, okay, that raises a little bit of an eyebrow there. a little bit of a question of whether you're going to trade Addison. They get to the end of this year and make a lot of decisions. But the fact that they know that they can usually keep people, I think that it allows them to sign a 1-year deal. I think it allows them to sign somebody or readjust the contract knowing that if it goes well, they'll probably stay. Like when we talk about the culture you create, I had CJ Ham on the show and he talked about this. He talked about the relationships that Kevin O'Connell builds, and you can roll your eyes, but then you just seem to sign any player you want. And over the last, 3 years now, I mean, it matters because the reputation gets out. That NFLPA survey, those guys pay attention to it. They look at it. They know that Jalen Naylor got overpaid in free agency, right? So very interesting. Nerdy says the Vikings should take Brandon Sorsby in the second round of the supplemental draft. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. I would not go second round, I guess. I'd probably go third if you were going to do it. I saw Sorsby play a couple times. I didn't really think he was an NFL quarterback. I've seen a lot of people tout him that way. I don't think that you can. I just don't know who wants to add a quarterback who was betting on his team in the supplemental draft. That seems very risky to do if you have to give up a draft pick for that. But I get where you're coming from. I probably wouldn't do it. Feline Master P Cisco says, I don't know how you guys come up with these names. Is he like Jarius Wright? If not, why? No, he's not. He is like, who is he like? He's not like anybody the Vikings have had in a while. I might say that he is closer to Adam Thielen than he is Jarius Wright. Now, I don't mean peak Adam Thielen jumping over Marshawn Lattimore, 2019 catch over, not circus catch Adam Thielen, but I mean, he's more of a Mack truck than he is a Ferrari. Like, Jarius Wright was a small wide receiver who was really, really smart and really good at kind of finding space and getting open at the right times. And people would kind of forget about him. He would go in the slot and just get open and would make plays, but he had great speed. I think he was like a 4.4 guy. Jauan Jennings is not that. He's kind of like an Anquan Bolden type, not as big, but he's bigger, big body, really strong dude, possession wide receiver. So if it's 3rd and 6, he'll get you 8 is kind of, but I don't mean he can't at all ever go downfield, but red zone, he's been super effective for them in the last couple of years. So he's much more of that kind of bigger body, strong wide receiver that wins that way than he is like little and quick like Jarius Wright was. Purple Kool-Aid. Rob Jennings signing is pure, was refreshing every hour this week for this. Yeah, well, me too, man. I mean, once they bring somebody in, you're like, is this going to happen or not? But even like Stephon Gilmore, recruiting him, you think of the number of players they've got in here over the last couple of years. That's why when we talk about is O'Connell on the hot seat and everything else, like it would be really tough to say that when they end up with a winning record last year and players want to be here. Kyler Murray could have gone to other teams. Kyler Murray comes here. I mean, it just, sometimes maybe last year they were using their power too much. The fact that they could get kind of whatever free agents they wanted. So, but to wait on this and do it now is very smart by the Vikings, because the downside is basically nothing. I mean, what other positions? What's $8 million? What did they pay like Jihad Ward? Was that kind of like $8 million? I mean, there's just been, a lot of signings around the NFL for $8 million that are nothing impressive at all, that are just kind of a role player or whatever. And this is somebody who should be, if we're trying to project him, somewhere in the range of like 40 or 50 catches, I would guess. I'm curious. I'm curious what the like fantasy people think. Purple Kool-Aid. His game is very similar to Wright as far as the 10 to 15 yard route guy. Yeah, no, that's true. How they get there is different. Wright was small and quick. He was a more traditional slot wide receiver. Jennings is more of a big slot, but it's similar in that way. Yes. Timothy pumped up for Jauan Jennings signing. He gets a lot of red zone targets. Yep, definitely. Brian, he's done a lot of strange things on the field to question character. He better quit the bleep. That I agree with. And that is something that, I was trying to look into to understand what is that? Is it that he just talks trash and he goes too far? Is it that he's like loses his mind when he's out there a little bit? I don't know. So they're going to have to manage that. And that might be part of why they decided not to sign him in San Francisco. But I'm curious. It doesn't seem like I was looking for anything this week, Googling all over, looking on social media. Like, why isn't there more interest in Jauan Jennings? And I couldn't pin anything down other than he probably went into free agency, demanded a huge multi-year contract, and teams went elsewhere. And then he just got left with no seat when the music stopped. That's exactly what happened with Dalton Risner. I feel like it is a carbon copy of that, because Dalton Risner was worth way more than the Vikings signed him for both times and started both years, and then went to Cincy and started and still isn't paid that much. Some guys, it feels like they might have a flaw that the NFL just can't really get over, and they're like, we're not paying that guy. And I think with Jennings, it's like raw speed. I don't think that he's blazing fast, and I don't think that he has any tool where you go, okay, that's his cheat code. I think it's just solid across the board. His tool might be that he could handle Kyle Shanahan's offense. Joker Romeo Dobbs got 4 years, $68 million. I know. Rob thinks Jennings makes them a lock to win the division. I would be surprised. I'll go over and look. I'll go over and take a peek right now at FanDuel if anything changed. I don't know how much of that you guys can see. Only a little bit of it. I doubt anything changed with the Vikings. Still there at plus 600 to win the division. So the markets did not see Jauan Jennings sign and go, oh my gosh. But that's not how real football works anyway. Like betting markets are their own thing, and real football is its own thing. There is a trickle-down effect here to having someone like Jauan Jennings. And you don't have to put on your imagination cap to see it, because he just did it for the last, not just 2 years, but multiple years aside from that, as being a depth wide receiver. He's done it in the wide receiver 3 role, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 2. He threw a touchdown in the Super Bowl, right? And he's had some trick plays that I think Kevin O'Connell, I hope, doesn't try to use, but he's going to at some point. Oh, it's terrible for fantasy, Office Depot says. Okay. Well, that's right. Probably because if you drafted him in a keeper league or something, then you want him to go to a team where he's going to get 100 targets. Yeah, that makes sense. But in real football, having that flexibility of being able to play wide receiver 2 if someone gets hurt is really darn important. And also, when it comes to just being a target that makes teams think about him with his resume before, or if they don't, he's going to make him pay. And it might not be this. This was the case with Osborne, where in 2022, Osborne couldn't find a target in the first few games of the season and then sort of took off. It might be the same with Jauan Jennings, but we know he could do it. With a lot of players, what ends up happening is we go, well, if this, and this happen, this guy's going to be great. And sometimes it does. But with Jennings, you don't have to, well, if he takes this big next, he doesn't have to do that. He's already been a good wide receiver. Michael, who are we getting at defensive end now? I saw an article earlier by Will Raggets who tracks some down. I think, is AJ Epinesa still out there? I haven't looked closely at the list. Cam Jordan would be cool just because Steve Jordan. But there's a few guys that are out there that are, veterans who they could potentially bring in. But I do think they need one more, maybe someone who can really play a traditional defensive end, not like a 3-4, but I mean like a 4-3 defensive end. And maybe they can move people around for third downs or just have some depth, have a pass rusher to be a backup for Turner, because they're not going to be able to just play Van Ginkel and Turner the entire season. So they do need somebody else. Any snarky Ty Felton comments yet? No, not yet. I think that people understand this is a 1-year contract. And if somebody gets hurt, Ty Felton is the next man up at wide receiver 3. So there's just, I think way too much attention on the fact that he hasn't gotten out there yet. Jalen Naylor didn't either when Adam Thielen was here. He didn't get out there for the first 2 seasons either. And they even used Brandon Powell Naylor got hurt, but they had to use like Brandon Powell and nothing happened. And then eventually it clicked. So I like the idea of giving young players time. The Vikings haven't always been able to do that. Timothy Brzezinski is operating like he'll be in charge of the front office when the GM search is completed, regardless of what the structure may end up being. Well, a move like this, because something we were talking about the other day was, well, you can't really sign Jauan Jennings to a 3-year contract if you have a new GM coming in, but you sure as heck can sign him to a 1-year, $8 million deal. You can definitely do that if there's, because that's not changing anything about the new GM's job. And Rob is going to be here. Whether the new GM is Rob or not, he's going to be here. As Seifert was talking about earlier about how you can't look at this list of GMs and think that they're going to bring in someone who blows out everybody or whatever. That's just not going to happen. The front office is probably going to stay mostly the front office, maybe with some new ads or, a little shift here or there of certain people. But if they hire an outside GM, Rob's still going to be here. But it might mean potentially, Mark Wilf said it wasn't going to be, but that doesn't mean that he was telling the truth or may have changed his mind about the idea of having a president of football operations who can have a final say on stuff and be the liaison to ownership. I like that for Rob. After the way this offseason was managed, I kind of like the idea of Rob as the general manager, but these other people come from great organizations. Some of them have Super Bowl rings. Not going to downplay it. The list is good. The list is a bunch of really good, strong candidates that they have, but Rob's going to continue to be a part of this. So this front office has certainly made an argument this offseason for don't fire all of us. And the coaches have also made a good argument for when we're involved, we can get some good things done. But I think that it goes more to Rob because the constraints were put on, and that had to be frustrating. I'm sure coaches would have said, come on, man, just restructure one more deal. Give me one more edge rusher. Give me one more of this. I'm sure coaches didn't love the idea of trading Jonathan Grenard, but Rob has the credibility and also the vision, I guess. For him to make that comment at the owners' meetings, he must have had a plan of, all right, this is how we're really going to play free agency. And sometimes, I guess we call it third wave. Sometimes third wave has some good signings. So they played it really well. And if I'm O'Connell or I'm Flores, I'm probably advocating for Rob Brzezinski. Maurice, there goes running the ball. That's funny. With all the wide receivers and tight ends, are going to throw it every play. They have at least made it. One thing I will give Kevin O'Connell this, that in the hirings, changing an offensive line coach, when they've changed almost none of the coaching staff on the offensive side. So to make a big change there to somebody who was involved in Derrick Henry running outside zone in Tennessee, that's where the roots for Keith Carter are, and bringing in Frank Smith, you have to give them the fact that they have invested in the running game's improvement, and then drafting a fullback, drafting a guy who runs a 4-3, those are real tangible investments in the run game. Would you be surprised if it's 60-40? No, but maybe Kyler scrambles. Kyler scrambles will even out the run-pass ratio. That's the way O'Connell will look at it. But look, passing is still better than running. And with 3 good wide receivers and a good tight end, 2 good tight ends, really, Aaron Jones can catch out of the backfield. Everything is there for Kyler Murray. Mr. Mayer says if we had signed Kyler Murray, James Pierre, and Jauan Jennings day one of free agency, people would have had a much different opinion of Vikings free agency. And that was Rob's point at the owners' meetings, and why I keep going back to that one quote of keep the powder dry, because he said, we don't kick off till September. We don't have to do this right now. You don't have to make every signing on day one of free agency, and their patience had really paid off. You're absolutely right. If they had signed Jennings to this deal on day one of free agency, we would have lost our minds. How did you get that deal? There's no deals on day one of free agency. That's why the Raiders and the Titans signed everybody, because they're terrible and they are desperate. Well, what the Vikings decided to be was not terrible and desperate, but not only that, but not restructuring those contracts. You cannot say enough how important that was, because when we were using Stick to the Models website and restructuring every deal so we could, sign this guy and sign that guy, it was like, oh man, good thing we're just sitting at home using this website, because the salary cap into the future is screwed, but we're just trying to have an off season. I thought that that's what they would do anyway, just because there's so much talent right now that's going to be potentially out the door after this year, but they found a way to not do it. Very well done. Taslios says going to be very interested in the actual contract to bet their incentives. Oh yeah. That's when they come out with the top number and then Pelissero comes out with the actual number. It's like, oh, okay. It's actually 8 with the possibility to get to 13. So yeah. Maurice, Kyler Murray's going to lead the Vikings in rushing during the first quarter of the season. Write it down. That's funny. Ron, that's the first time I was still on air when the breaking news came. That's a really good point, that oftentimes I would be signing off. And we were having a good discussion before, so I feel bad for the people who left comments about the owner or the GM search. And then suddenly we got the breaking news, but this definitely adds some juice to the discussion. And that's one of the reasons to just go live, right? I was thinking tonight, well, I don't know. I guess we got some candidates, but we'll see. And here we are. So a good choice to do that. Daniel, amazing signing. Rob, cap guru and GM. Well, he's had a little help. They brought in another cap guy to give him a hand. So they would, if he were to become the GM, I think they would have to get another specific cap person, but that's where his skill is. And that's why, from the GM perspective, I was a little bit surprised that it's just all scouts and that there wasn't any of the money counters that got included in this GM search. Because, I guess maybe they think, who could do it better than Rob? If we want a money counter, then we're going to go with Rob. But that's how you win. That's how you win this game. There's 2 games that happen. There's the game on Sundays where your coaches have to outcoach the other team. And there's the game that happens in March and April and apparently now May, where you have to manage what the NFL gives you to work with better than the other people. It's really that simple. They give you so much cap and they give you so many draft picks and you got to figure it out. It's a puzzle, and who can solve that puzzle the best wins, as long as they have good enough quarterback play. And the Vikings were getting, I think, the only edge in solving the puzzle was that they had Brian Flores and Kevin O'Connell. O'Connell being able to get players to come in here, and Brian Flores being able to make everything that he can out of whatever he's able to get, right? That's been their edge. And now I think if they manage with Rob Brzezinski their assets really well, which, look, the next general manager could too. He'll have Rob Brzezinski here, but this is just a really job well done. And I said this the other day, I'll keep saying it. If they hire somebody else as a GM, I'm not going to say, well, what a travesty that they didn't give it to Rob Brzezinski, but I will say that, boy, did he do a lot to help this next person, because Jauan Jennings for 1 year, you get to decide next GM, do you want him or not? You get to decide on Hawkinson. You get to decide on Jones. You get to decide on O'Neal, it seems, because there's no extension there. You get to decide on all that stuff. And and Kyler Murray is the biggest one. And if you want to overhaul, you can, or if you want to keep it together, you can. There's a lot of options there. So Jay Moles, best trio in the league. Rob, totally right. They could have drafted Jeff Caldwell in the 7th, but I'll take Jennings every day. Okay, two different things there. But it would have been more like a draft pick doesn't really affect this anyway, because it's a 1-year contract. So if they had drafted Brennan Thompson in the 4th or Skylar Bell in the 4th, that really doesn't have a lot to do with Jauan Jennings for a 1-year deal. So they should have taken, well, I don't know about Jeff Caldwell, but they should have taken somebody. Cause and effect, does this close the door on D-Hop? I would assume so. Yeah. I don't think that DeAndre Hopkins would sign up to be wide receiver 4 for the Vikings. Maybe. I mean, he said at the airport to TMZ, he said that, hey, I don't want to be a wide receiver 1 again, but I would assume he wants to be on the field. It seems like Hopkins is probably done in the NFL if he's not going to come to the Vikings and work with Kyler Murray, but maybe somebody signs him. Jennings is still in his prime, 28 years old. Scamping around Ty Felton, hopefully going to get some good mentoring. I mean, I think he'll be on the team. He'll be, of course he'll be on the team, but I mean, I think he'll be on the field and he'll get a little bit more of a role. I mean, last year, everybody stayed healthy. Like, what's the odds that everybody stays healthy 2 years in a row, the wide receiver position? So he's going to have to be ready and we could see more of him. But now you don't have to only rely on him. That was the concerning part was, man, if you get one of those guys hurt and he's got to be wide receiver 2, that's a lot. But now if one of those guys get hurt, he's wide receiver 3. Or even if Jennings gets hurt, he's wide receiver 3. Rob, I did see that Joe Sensor passed away. That's been a tough couple of months. Joey Browner, Doug Martin for that era of Vikings players. Daniel, Vikings getting a great blocking wide receiver, which will really help in the Miami system. One thing I noticed for the Miami system is that they use a lot of condensed sets, which means a lot of wide receivers getting involved in the run blocking. And Jennings maybe takes just a little heat off of, and KJ did this too, just takes a little bit of heat off of Jefferson and Addison. Rob, who our defense is going to cover? Jets, Addison, Jennings, TJ. I mean, we can't forget, that Aaron Jones is also one of the best receiving running backs in the entire NFL still. If he's healthy, that's a lot of weapons for Kyler Murray. And that's just going back to that point, is leaving no stone unturned for Kyler Murray is, I think, important here. That you don't want to get to the end of the road with Kyler Murray and still feel like you don't know. And sure, like we've seen catastrophes happen and so forth like that. It does happen where everybody gets hurt and it's a mess, but more likely than not, Kyler Murray's going to have enough. He's going to have enough coaching. He's going to have enough weapons. He's going to have enough blocking. He's going to maybe even have enough running game around him to know whether this is a guy that you want to be your long-term quarterback or not. I think that's really, really important. Kerpluppy, what team would you say has the most archetype? Is that right? Is that how you say it? Seattle Seahawks of a year ago. New quarterback, ready to bloom, large draft class, ready to play. I mean, are you getting at the Vikings with that? Is that who you're kind of hinting at, or you think that there's somebody else you're talking about? Like, who is the team that's ready to take their next step? I think Washington, not necessarily draft class, but I guess they did get Sonny Styles. Washington is probably the team that, other than, the Vikings with a new quarterback and, most of the stuff that they've had for a while, but some additions here, Washington makes sense. But I think that that's what you're referring to, right? Is that the Vikings have some similarities here with the Seattle Seahawks. And, I mentioned a lot of it is about your weaknesses in the NFL. It comes down to, do you have enough players to fill out every position and enough depth to fill out every position? Because that's what Seattle has had. That's what the Eagles have had. That's what the 49ers have had. You can't just be hoping and praying. And we've gone through this many times of, well, this guy's got to do this and this guy's got to do that. And this guy's got to have a career year and then maybe they can be good. I don't feel like that's the case on offense. I do feel like there's some of it on defense. So there might be more signings coming on the way. And I think this shows us that there's at least interest in doing that and being players now. Nighttime, you're mentioning Kenny Moore. I would like that. Definitely would like that. Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. I actually thought about texting Manny Hill today and saying that, asking if he wanted to pop in because he is a huge Jauan Jennings guy, is a massive Vols fan. So we'll get Manny. The schedule is going to come out soon, and that's when Manny is at his best because Manny picks the schedule. So when the schedule comes out, I think next week, I'm guessing, then Manny will be on for sure. Dallas Turner wears 15. I wonder what Jennings will wear. I don't know. Never really loved wide receivers wearing single digit numbers. Maybe that's an old man take. Kind of like him wearing 82 and 81 and 84. So maybe not 84 for this team. Although they haven't retired it. Jeff Jennings is top 5 in contested catches over the last 2 years with 58.2 contested catch rate. Right. And I think that's why the NFL doesn't love him, is that he's not a huge separator. He's not like a Stephon Diggs. He's going to juke everybody out. He's not like a Jalen Naylor. He's going to run by you. He's going to, over his head, make some circus catch. It's really that he outmuscles people. And I think that one of his big cheat codes is that he can do a lot of different stuff. Like he could play different roles. So that strength, the toughness element, physicality, they haven't had that in that wide receiver room. And now he is bringing it. Josh feels like KOC made a deal with B-Flow. You get the draft picks and I get the big free agent. I think that Kevin O'Connell has wanted the interior defensive line to be better. So I don't think that it was just Brian Flores stealing the phone. That's something that seems to have been bothersome to Kevin O'Connell for the last couple of years. There's been very little investment in the D-line, but you're right. I mean, the offense had a lot less sort of long-term stuff to think about than maybe the defense, where they just needed a lot more players because it's gotten old and they've lost defensive tackles. So, but yeah, I mean, it does kind of feel like that. Super Bowl, let's go, of course. Yeah, finally. Okay, there's Craig. You win. You win today for the best comment, for the funniest comment, which is finally a wide receiver who can handle the tush push. Well done. Well done. He's not 5'7" and 160 pounds like Brandon Powell. That's a great callback right there. Vegas problem is at Pro Gambler, right? Vegas Pro Gambler says, imagine if we didn't have Kwesi the last 5 years. Well, I mean, see, that's funny because the roster is good, built mostly while Kwesi was here. I don't think that we can equate some of the mistakes that were made or some of the issues internally with everything that you did was wrong. The asset management was good for a little bit, and then the asset management got bad once they got a hint of winning. And them not signing the quarterback is really what made it. But I think that the way that Rob has handled this for the circumstances has been very impressive. So I think it would be rewriting history to look at this roster and say, oh, that guy had nothing to do with it. I mean, look at the free agent signings that they made with Andrew Van Ginkel and Cashman and getting Stephon Gilmore in here and stuff like that. Like, they built a really good team. Aaron Jones, Kwesi was here, but it was time to move on. And I think maybe one of the reasons was they needed someone who could be as shrewd as possible. And Rob has been, and shrewd is as much of a compliment as you can get under the circumstances, because they were in cap hell. They were in a very difficult cap spot, and they found their way out of it and got better as a football team. I mean, at quarterback by leaps and bounds, they lucked into that. But this kind of signing is not necessarily luck. This is playing your cards correctly. Matt, does Peppers and Bayard do anything? Is Bayard still out there? I thought he signed. Peppers, though, Peppers is, or Cam Jordan, Von Miller does not. Cam Jordan kind of does, because I think he could still play. He just doesn't fit the defense at all, but the heck with it. Figure it out. When it comes to Jabril Peppers, I've always thought that he would make sense in a Flores defense because he is a multiple type of player. I don't know what the story with him is. It seemed like he just sort of fell out of favor in New England. I really don't fully understand what happened. I was asking New England writers last year, and they're kind of like, I don't know. Just started to not really fit what they were doing. But I've always thought skill set wise that he would make a lot of sense. There has been some hint of character stuff with him, but in terms of his skill set, yeah, Jabril Peppers would make sense. I was looking at Donovan Wilson as kind of like your old pro. He's been around for a long time. He's been a good blitzer. Gets a handful of interceptions. If they're going to go in that direction. Bengals have a good wide receiver group. Who is their, is it Yosavash, who's their wide receiver 3? But their top 2 are as good as anyone. They probably have the best top 2. Diet 3D, put it on a t-shirt. That's funny. Addison, as far as I know, will not be suspended for what happened. There's been no indication that there will be. I mean, unless you're projecting a future suspension, which I suppose is possible. Jarrett says, if A.J. Brown stays in Philly, but I'd rather have the Vikings 3. Brian says the Vikings have the best 3 on paper. Murray better sling it. Yep. I mean, look, he threw for 3,800 yards 2 years ago. So it's not like he can't throw the ball. But they might have him stand in there a little bit more often and try to get him to not do, too many crazy things. Rob, Kyler is career top 5 in passing accuracy. His on-target percentage, I remember looking at this since he's come into the league, is one of the best in the NFL. And he does get the ball out quickly a lot, and they ran a lot of quick game with him, with both coaching staffs. Jennings just helps that because he's a guy that you are going to have as a possession wide receiver. You're not just going to be like heaving it down the field. Phenom says the Vikings have more than a few guys that will be highly motivated this year. I mean, that's got to be part of the benefit. Up north, 13 mil for a third wide receiver. Is that a lot? It actually is not. And it's 8 mil with the potential to get to 13. So it's really 8 is the minimum, but with whatever incentives, he could get to 13, but it's really not. I mean, if you look at the wide receiver signings over the last 2 years, there's guys who have played a wide receiver 3 role, wide receiver 2 role that have, wide receiver 2 has gotten up to like 28 million as T Higgins, but even into the low 20s for a lot of the guys. This is very standard for a wide receiver 3 or even a little bit below. I use the Josh Palmer example. That was $10 million. I mean, he's not as good as Jauan Jennings. And the other example was Tutu Atwell, also not as good as Jauan Jennings. And those guys got more. Diami Brown, I believe, did too. So the running rate has been around 10. Planet Yevon Addison has been well behaved this offseason, except for the one thing. But yeah, overall, since then. Well, Guitar ICU, why didn't San Francisco want him is something that we've been talking about. And it feels like San Francisco, sometimes it goes this way, where a player thinks they're worth X for their team. And when they don't get it, they would rather sign somewhere else than come back at a lighter price. San Francisco also was clearly going to go toward the draft. They've got Ricky Pearsall, and they wanted Stribling so much that they overdrafted him by like a round and a half. So it seems like they just had a different plan at wide receiver than Jennings, but also maybe they feel like they can pump up anybody too. I think San Francisco probably is a little bit cocky about that they think, hey, we can bring in these guys, second rounder, Stribling or whatever, and we're going to get the most out of just about anybody. And they were looking for, Stribling is really fast. So they may have been looking to get faster, but I don't know. There were issues there with a contract and Jennings last year where he wanted a new deal or he wanted to be traded. So clearly something wasn't right on the same page. But this is why, I don't claim that Jauan Jennings is the best wide receiver in the world. They're signing him for wide receiver 3, not wide receiver 1. If they were signing him for wide receiver 1, I'd be like, all right, pump the brakes here. But this is why you have it on a 1-year deal, because there may be some reasons why the rest of the league didn't want to sign him, just like they didn't want to sign Dalton Reisner because he wasn't that great of a run blocker. So it's like, well, he's got some weaknesses, but that doesn't mean he doesn't do things well that can help you in the right role. So, iconic. Jauan is going to be a good big body to pair with Jefferson and Addison. Right. He brings them just a little bit more grit. And that's something that this offense doesn't have a lot of other than Josh Oliver and CJ Ham. Now they bring in Bredesen. Jordan Mason gave him a little bit of that last year, a little more sandpaper, but Jennings gives that to them. Like, he's a San Francisco style wide receiver. He's bigger. He's going to play physical. He's apparently going to really tick off opponents. And so, but that's the thing. Like, somebody said he's immature. If he does turn out to be immature, or maybe you're talking about Addison, but if he does turn out to be immature, then, you only got him for 1 year. It's not like you have to have him for 3 years with huge guaranteed money. Guitar, how do we know Rob is not a big analytics guy? So far, it looks like he may be. Well, I don't think Rob is an analytics guy as in his background isn't in analytics, but that doesn't mean he doesn't believe in it. That doesn't mean he doesn't use it. I get the sense that what Rob was doing during his time as the GM is having everybody feel involved. And we heard that from one of the Vikings top scouts that talked to us on the day of the draft, day 3, and said that he had a lot of, some of the most fun that he's had throughout this process. Felt like everyone's voice was heard, and the way that Kevin O'Connell has talked about working with Rob. But I think what Rob just understands is a deal. And he doesn't, at least from this small sample size, just jump at something and say, just sign him to whatever he wants because you really want it right now. They played this as if they had a sense that there would be guys that came available later on in free agency that would be better deals than if they spent on day one. And they were right. It was a little bit of a risk to do, but it was good. Sean, this is what I'm talking about with, like, let's not totally rewrite history on Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. Okay. This looks better than anything Kwesi did. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Kwesi was the general manager when they signed Grenard, Van Ginkel, and Cashman on the same day, dude. That was like franchise shifting. And then Jones, and then Gilmore. I mean, they had and Sam Darnold. Like, I know that you could say, well, that was this person and that was that person, but he was the general manager in charge when they had that great offseason, when they won 14 games. So let's not, and a lot of the foundation of this team was in some way or another built by him, including Donovan Jackson, including Jordan Addison. We can't rewrite the whole history. He was here for a very big portion of this roster build. But under the circumstances Rob was given, he did as well as he ever could have to set them up to the future. So, we can't, just because the guy got let go doesn't mean. That was more, I think, about the future than it was the past. It wasn't about an individual move or this or that. It was really about, there's some rocky waters that are about to hit. Is this the person that we want in charge when it seems like there's headbutting or it seems like they're not able to get on the same page? And Rob was able to come in and do that. Joker, look at how easy it is to get talent to want to play for the Vikings. We should easily get the GM candidate out there. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. And that comes back to Kevin O'Connell. If you have a reputation as being the place that everyone wants to play, where your family is taken care of, and that's a big Wilf thing, when you are heard in the locker room, when there's a coach who's considerate and not just a psycho, and that doesn't mean soft, it means considerate. It means understanding what players are thinking. It means communicates well. It means fair. It means not, I don't know, like Zimmer used to do things where you just call people out in, tape sessions and stuff like that. Like they don't, there's some coaches out there who are crazy and mean, and that's not Kevin O'Connell. So I think that the facilities, everything, the fact that you could stay in a hotel that's within walking distance of the facility. So, they've kind of got you taken care of there. Like there's a lot of things that are very considerate about the Vikings organization. You could say, well, they're soft. I wish they played in a dirt field or whatever. And that's okay. I mean, I guess, but when you are the top team with all this stuff, you get the Jauan Jennings sometimes. Red Star says, to be fair, JJ made Jefferson look like a wide receiver too, so it's hard to put stats on Naylor. Oh, I agree. I think Jalen's going to do great. I like Naylor a lot. But when you just compare the last 2 years, I mean, it's literally double the number of receptions. I'm not dumping on Jalen Naylor. I just think for the same price, but less years, I mean, that's just pretty darn good. So KOC could sell ice to an Eskimo. Morale, KOC with the high NFLPA grade every year matters. It absolutely matters. I asked a bunch of guys about that last year. I asked Ryan Kelly about it. Everybody said it's a huge deal. They all read it. They all know. They all look at it and go, who are the top teams that you want to play for? And this team is actually like good. Evan, what's FanDuel over-under on Jennings trick plays? That's very funny. That's good. That's a good one. The FanDuel question of the day, we shifted, by the way, to The Vikings still plus 600. They haven't moved since the draft. They actually went down from plus 550 to win the division. Does this move the needle for you? Does it get them closer to the top of the division? Seems like the answer is yes. Canova, you could tell by the bottom line of all these deals, Brzezinski is a big part of his mindset. The trade of Grenard is a very hard trade to make. That is not something that's easy to do. It's a captain. It's a productive player. It's a great person. It's somebody every team would love to have on their team and in their locker room. But to be able to say, look, the way I'm adding it up, it's better if we move on. And now you could sign Jennings, but also maybe somebody else, or maybe two somebody else's. And then you go, all right, so now part of Grenard being traded is Jauan Jennings. Part of it's Jacoby Thomas. Part of it's whoever they draft next year. Part of it is who they spend $22 million in free agency on next year. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. Deplorable Neanderthal. Vikings got the first and second best deals in free agency this year. I don't know I can't remember off the top of my head every single deal in free agency, but Kyler Murray is by far the best deal. A starting quarterback who could be top 15 for $1 million that's a good deal. But that one fell into their lap. It didn't. I mean, he wanted to come here because of O'Connell and because of Jefferson and what they have. But this deal is much more of the Vikings just playing it really well. Jay Mulls, maybe Sidney Rice. Sidney Rice is fast as hell. So I don't think it's quite Sidney Rice. It's more Marcus Robinson than it is Sidney Rice. If you want to go to that era, maybe it's like, is it a little Nate Burleson? Nate was faster. This is not a fast guy. It's like, it's late stage, but not washed Adam Thielen. Like late stages in 2022. It's closer to KJ Osborne's speed level. But he wasn't really, although, yeah, I'd say he's better than KJ Osborne probably as an all around wide receiver, but it's got some similar vibes. It's like a guy who's physical, strong, smart enough to handle multiple positions, but isn't necessarily this crazy route runner, separator, like something like that. Guitar, should the Vikings go after Kenny Moore? The Colts just released him. I really like the idea of Kenny Moore. It's kind of similar to this, like probably 1 year, probably a good deal. Shouldn't be that expensive, and he fits as a slot defender, which they may need if Harrison Smith is not here, because Josh Metellus has kind of been the big slot. But Metellus, if he's got to play a regular safety position, then you might need someone to start at a slot corner, which they haven't really done. Phenom, I would not say he's Jake Reed. Jake Reed was just really good. That's like a 4-time 1,000-yard receiver. It's not on that level, I don't think. Anquan Bolden's like later Anquan Bolden. Charles Johnson. Charles Johnson's a great pull. Laquan, if he was good, I like that. I like Laquan if he was good. Stevens signed Jadeveon Clowney and Nolan Teasley as the GM. I like all these GM candidates have a good case. Each one of them they're very similar. They all come from good organizations, good backgrounds. I'm not sure how they're going to like parse that out, but Teasley comes from the Super Bowl champ. They built really well. They drafted extremely well. They made really good free agent signings. The DeMarcus Lawrence signing is the most underappreciated free agent signing in a long time. So they did a great job with the Seattle build, and the Vikings could certainly emulate a lot of that in the future. So I'm not against that. Kind of like Roddy White, Brian says. There's always next year. Truly impressed by how Rob has maneuvered with the cap flexibility for the future. The O-line has gotten better, receiving room better, quarterback room, and multiple young defensive players. Can't disagree with that. Joker, 49ers Reddit. He's their best QB already. That's funny. Armin, best wide receiver trio since Moss, Carter, Reed. I mean, I do think that Addison, Jefferson, and Osborne is pretty good, but they didn't all like match up at once. Jefferson got hurt 2023. So did Osborne. So they didn't really match up. And Osborne has not been as successful as Jennings. It probably is. I mean, it honestly probably is the best trio that they've had overall. Does Jennings make up for the Thielen trade? No, not exactly. You don't get the draft capital back from Carolina, but it's a good signing. Oh, Joe came up with Marcus Robinson too. Joseph, does the Jennings signing say anything about the new GM? Maybe not, because it's 1 year. I don't think that it does. No, I don't think that a 1 year deal worth up to $13 million every GM that they're going to hire is probably pretty comfortable with a 1 year contract. What they wouldn't have wanted, if they signed somebody to like a 3 year, $45 million deal, you'd be like, is Rob the GM already? Also the people that they're bringing in, it doesn't look like Rob is the GM already. It looks like they're very serious. I mean, these are highly thought of candidates from really great franchises. One guy's been a GM before, so it's not like, it doesn't look like a bunch of, people who are just being brought in for the heck of it. Tyler says he's kind of like DK Metcalf. I think that he's not quite like DK Metcalf because Metcalf is insanely fast for his size. I don't think Jennings is like that. I don't think that breakaway speed is really his thing. Joker says 49ers fans are sad and wishing him luck. That's what I was wondering about. I was curious, like if they are saying good riddance or if they're going to miss him. Evan, teams paid insane money for Romeo Doubs and some wide receivers in the same range as Jennings. So he must have been asking. No, I think he was asking for wide receiver 2 money, which is 17 to 24 or 20. Well, 28 is the high end wide receiver 2, but T Higgins is an exception. It's really like 17 to 23, 24 million a year, which is just not what Jauan Jennings was ever going to get. Evan says, for FanDuel question of the day, no way Jennings doesn't bring us back to plus 550. I think you should get him closer. I think the overall offseason, plus the fact that they could still make some moves, should be a little bit closer. I think that all the teams in the NFC North should be somewhere in like squeezed together very tightly. But it's hard not to look at this and say, man, if Kyler Murray could play at all, they've got the horses to win the division or be right there. Is he going with purple hair this year? Yeah, he is a color the hair guy. Lone Wolf says Jennings is a wide receiver 1B playing wide receiver 3. Not only does he help us this season, gives us options at the end of the season. I look at him as like a very, very high end wide receiver 3, but could play wide receiver 2 on probably 20 teams. That's why it's surprising that he was out there this long. But I mean, we're going to get an answer from Kevin O'Connell tomorrow when we ask. I'm sure that we'll have a discussion with somebody, whoever the GM is. I don't know. It's weird. Usually you'd be able to ask the GM, hey, this signing you made, is it weird that he was available or why was he available? But I don't think we're going to be able to ask anybody except for Kevin O'Connell that. So maybe we'll get an answer there. I really just think that at the beginning of free agency, Jennings went out and said, I am going to get myself a $20 million a year contract. And the NFL went, nope, you're actually not, because we see you as a product of San Francisco and not somebody who can drive our offense. So the Vikings waited and waited, and then eventually he just picked the best franchise that could help him get to a point where he proves that he's more than just a product of San Francisco in a similar type role, and then get a bigger paycheck next year. I think that's probably what he's looking at. Armin Golday will be edge 3. I'd prefer not. I mean, I'd prefer that they not ask a rookie to be an edge rusher, because I think that he's a linebacker, kind of hybrid outside linebacker, and I'd like to see him play early on in some sort of role, but you'd prefer to have a veteran there in case someone got hurt, because I don't think you want, hey, Andrew Van Ginkel got hurt or Turner got hurt for 3 weeks. Jake, just go play defensive end. Like, you've never really done that before. So I think they need a true backup edge rusher. Brian says Jennings' previous injuries aren't alarming. Fact that he played through a lot of them is promising. Yeah, I mean, some of you guys. Sean says now with the triple-headed monster plus healthy TJ, no suspended Addison. Hey, it's early. a running game, Aaron Jones receiver out of the backfield. Can you still double team Jefferson? They're going to have to try. That's the thing. I mean, it's a Vikings strategy always and forever, right? Load up on weapons and bring in a random quarterback and profit. This offense, if Kyler can just do his job, he's got to be in the 10 range. If everyone is healthy, if the line is healthy, if Kyler plays well. But they've just given him, how much more could you ask for if you're Kyler Murray than what he's got here? I mean, maybe a 6'7" center isn't the most ideal thing, but even Brandel, played well enough to convince them to stick with Brandel, and they didn't go out and get some terrible center. Like, they're going to stick with that. He's going to go through the entire offseason as the starting center. So anyway, Aaron, kept the powder dry for signings like this. Craig says, thank goodness it's a 1-year deal. Now we get to listen to your opinion if they need to draft a wide receiver in the first round next year. You nailed it, Craig. That's right. And guess what? I'm going to give you a little preview. Yes. Yes, they need to draft another receiver. They always do, and probably should have this year, but neither here nor there. They end up getting a really good deal. We could take a look at his PFF grades if you want. Let me see. I will need a second. I don't know when it comes to, sorry, I can't do two things at once. When it comes to his blocking grades, I just don't know how good. No, actually, no. No. Last year it wasn't good. Okay, hold on. I'll get you the full screen on this. Sorry. Here you go. So last year it was not good, but in previous seasons, it's mostly been very good in terms of run blocking. So I'm going to lean toward he's overall a good run blocker. He goes at 6'3", 212 pounds. He's a big dude. So a couple mistakes can cause you to get hit pretty hard when you're, not doing it that often. But in terms of his PFF grades receiving wise, he's always been solid. He's always been in the green. And in 2024, he was great. 975 yards, 77 catches, 83 PFF grade. Last year was 68, but he catches 9 touchdowns. This is an interesting number, slot percentage. He was a slot guy when he came into the league. And then the last 2 years, he's played a more complete role for the 49ers. So, it's hard to find too much to dislike there. So, anyway, the Giants do look to be improved. I think we were talking about like teams in the NFC, how everyone's going to kind of be similar. Murray has never had an offense this good before in his career. I don't think there's any comparison to Deshaun Watson, but yeah. Gunnard, Rob just casually making amazing moves, right? As the GM candidate list comes out. Yeah. Wait till the day that all the GMs come out and then do your best stuff. Jared, 88 is your favorite wide receiver number. I think 81 for me. The Anthony Carter is probably my favorite. So anyway, well, my dog is desperate to go outside. I think we've covered Jauan Jennings signing from a lot of different angles, but very interesting development in the middle of the show. How about that? Tomorrow, the Vikings are having rookie minicamp available to the media, so I will be there. And I'll bring back whatever we can gather about the Jauan Jennings signing and also whatever we see. Normally, it's a little bit hard to figure out on day one of rookie minicamp who the next superstars are for the Minnesota Vikings, but every once in a while, somebody stands out, and we'll probably hear from a lot of the guys after practice as well, so that will be interesting. I'll gather all that, bring it back here, tell it to you, and we'll have another really good conversation. So thanks, everybody, for joining. This was a lot of fun to get this breaking news in here, and we will do it again tomorrow night. I'll be live at, call it 6:30 or 7, somewhere in that range. But if you haven't liked, subscribed to the channel, the numbers keep going up. We're headed towards 16,000 subscribers. That's awesome. So thank you all for that. and we'll talk to you tomorrow night.